Uh, Hi everyone, welcome to the Ballerina Monthly Tech Talk. My name is Joseph Fonseca and I'm from the Ballerina Developer Tooling team. In today's call, myself and Sumud will be discussing about Ballerina OpenAPI support. So before we get started on the session, I just want to let you know the different community channels that we have and how you can get involved. Please find the links to our Twitter and Slack channel shared via the chat. For all the different ways you can get involved or contribute to Ballerina, please refer to the GitHub repo that is also shared via the chat now. And I will also like to mention that this call will be recorded and will be available via our YouTube channel. Right. Also, we'll open up for the discussions at the end of the session. So feel free to unmute uh, uh, the mic if you're joining from Zoom and ask questions directly, or you can post your questions onto the YouTube chat. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with the session. Okay, so let this is the agenda for today. Quite simple. So we'll first look at how OpenAPI can be used during service development, and then we'll move on to see how OpenAPI can be used when it comes to consuming APIs. So let me quickly explain what OpenAPI is. So basically, OpenAPI is a specification to describe RESTful web services. So it was like formerly known as Swagger, and some time back. So the name got changed to OpenAPI when the project was contributed to Linux Foundation. And as of now, this has become the industry standard when it's come to describing web services. And so you can see like a wide adoption in the industry for OpenAPI. So with OpenAPI, how it works is you can describe the API interface in a file. So usually it's a YAML file that you describe the interface with. So once you have this file defined, it can be consumed by these various tools that the community has developed, which related to various aspects of APIs. For example, so there are tools to generate documentation automatically uh, using an OpenAPI file. And also, so there are like tools where you can quickly deploy a try client for the API. And also we have like generator tools which helps you with producing and consuming APIs. So when it comes to Ballerina, all the OpenAPI tools are already built in with the distribution. So they are like readily available for you to try out. So you don't have to go and find different tools for different aspects. Okay, so let's talk a bit about how you can use OpenAPI during the service development flow. So when you start to develop an API, so your ultimate objective is to make the API a success, right? So that there'll be like wide adoption for your API, and a lot of developers would use it. So if you are targeting that, worrying about only the implementation wouldn't work. So you need to think beyond that. So that's why you need to think about the API documentation and the API adoption aspect from the start of the API development lifecycle. So always API documentation shouldn't be afterthought. It should be gradually evolved with the implementation throughout the API lifecycle. So again, when it comes to service development flow, there are like two different paths that you can take. One is you can either go code first or you can go design first. So basically what code first mean is when you want to develop a service, you start by writing the code for it. You will start with the implementation, and then you will keep on improving the implementation and until you get a satisfactory implementation done. So once you are done with it, then you will move on to the documentation phase. So at this point, OpenAPI will be quite handy because there are like tools where you can export the OpenAPI file based on the implementation that you do. So that's basically the code first approach. But some people like to do the design first approach. So where they will start by writing the API definition first. Usually they will capture the definition in a OpenAPI file and then keep on iterating over it until they come up with a good API design. So once they have a good API design, then they will use tools to generate the service stubs and then move on to the implementation. So those are like the main two parts that you can take, but there are like additional there are in reality there are like more finer parts that you can follow. So this particular blog post have like a good description of that. So later on, like you can read it if you have some time. So the bottom line is either path you follow, you need to ensure that API documentation will also get involved with that. Then another thing you need to keep in mind when it comes to service development is to cope with change. So basically, as you know, once you have the first version of the API is out, so soon you will get requests for new features or changes, right? So usually what happens is when these changes come, you will change the implementation, but then you might not be able to get the API documentation updated properly. So soon what we see usually is the documentation and the implementation go out of sync. So again, you need to ensure when the changes come, the documentation and the implementation stay in sync. Okay, so let's dive into a demo and see how Ballerina OpenAPI tools can be used in API development. So let's start with the code first approach. So let me create a service here. So in order to create a service, I'll start with creating a Ballerina package. So I'll use a bal new command. And for the demo, I'll create a pet store service, which is the classic OpenAPI sample. And then since it's a service, I'll start with a service template. Okay, so now a new package is created. So let's move into the package, and then let me open up with VS Code. Okay. So what you see here is the sample hello world service that is being created. So let's try to customize this and create a pet store API. So I'll start by updating the documentation. And then I'll give the base part that's pet store. And then I'll create the first resource to get all pets in the pet store. So here I'll define the path as pets, and I don't need any query parameters for now. And I'll define this resource return a pet array. Okay, so this is my first resource which will return array of pets in the pet store. So let's create a record to represent a pet. Let's define the attributes for the pet. So I'll define this as optional field, and then attribute to capture name. Capture category, and then finally availability of the pet. So here I define another record called category. So let's quickly create that as well. Category, and I'll define an ID and a name for the category. Okay, so now in Ballerina, the requests and response payloads, we use records. So we have defined these models, which will be used in this service. So now let's create a store to keep pets. So I'll define a pet array, which is a empty array, and to try this out, I'll add a default pet here. Okay, so now I have defined a store to keep the pets. So let's finish the implementation of this resource by returning the list of pets. Okay, so I have implement the first resource using Ballerina. So as you can see, I have defined the return types here as well. So let's quickly add another resource to create a pet in this store. I'll do a post to pets, and then here I'll define the payload. Okay, so I have the payload defined, and the payload is the type of pet. And now let's add it to the list. So I'll define a ID quickly, and then I'll push it to the list. So since this is a post request, let's define the return type as well. I'll use created HTTP created, and then I'll return HTTP created. Oops. Sorry, it should be returned. Okay, so I return a created response. Okay, so let's say I'm now finished with my implementation. So let's quickly try this out. So I'll start by running the service. Okay, so now the service is running. So let's try it out. So using this code lens, try it out. You can open the tryout console. So basically what you see here is a Swagger UI integrated into the Ballerina plugin. So here the plugin will extract the OpenAPI definition from this service and populate this try it client. And basically you can use this to try out the service. So let's try this out quickly. You need the ID. We'll add a pet called Buster. Insta and availability, yes. Okay, so we get a created response. So now let's see if the resource, the pet, get added to the list. So we can try out the get pets. So as you can see, the pet get added to the store. Okay. So basically, here you can see it's fairly easy to create a RESTful API with Ballerina. Now let's see how we can extract the OpenAPI file from this service. Let me close the running service. Okay, so to extract the OpenAPI, you can use the OpenAPI CLI command. So to extract, you can do bal OpenAPI, and then you can give the input as the service file. So when you give a bal file as input, OpenAPI command will automatically detect that you want to export the OpenAPI definition of the service, and then it will do that for you. Okay, so then the tool will create pets to OpenAPI.yaml. So if we open it, you can see the OpenAPI definition here. So the base path will be put into the service URL, and we also have information about the server, the port, and everything. And then you have the paths here, and we also define the responses. And if there are payloads, we also generate that for you in this OpenAPI definition. So here, let me open this with the Swagger preview plugin in VS Code. As you can see, you can visualize the API which is defined in the OpenAPI definition. So here, another thing to point out, the tool also generates the schemas that we define in the service. So in this case, it will generate the pet and the category, and these are in JSON schema format in the OpenAPI definition. So basically, the OpenAPI tool will convert the record that we define in Ballerina into a JSON schema format. So let me explain a bit on how we do the conversion. So let me go back to the presentation. So basically, JSON schema to Ballerina type mapping has its own specification. So basically, the primitive types will be mapped directly. So as you can see, we map null to nil in Ballerina, Boolean to Boolean, and we map number to decimal. So likewise, we map the primitive types. and for all the objects will be mapped to records in the Ballerina type, and also arrays will be mapped to Ballerina arrays. So these are like some of the examples. So if we haven't defined a type in JSON schema, then in Ballerina type system, we'll consider it as a any data type array. If the type is defined for numbers, then that will be the specific type array. And we have like further constraint in JSON schema, min items and max item. So here we will support the max number of items when it comes to Ballerina types. So this is an example for object schema to Ballerina type map. So as you can see, we have like all the properties defined in the schema as attributes in the records, and also the optional fields and required fields are also mapped accordingly with the schema and the record type. And we also do support some of the complex schema types defined in JSON schema specification. So when it comes to all of and one of, we have support on mapping them to Ballerina. So when it comes to all of, we use this type inclusion, and when it comes to one of, we use Ballerina union type. Okay, so this is demonstrate the code first approach. So where you define, you work on the implementation, and then export the definition, and afterwards you can continue to add additional details to the definition if you like. So next we'll move on to the design first approach and see how you can start from OpenAPI definition and then move on to implementation. So let me close this. So here I have a pet store YAML, which define a complete pet store API. So as you can see, it has like many resources, and though the resources are categorized into 3 categories based on the entity. So you have the pet resources for the pet, store, and user. And also, like if you scroll down, you can see it also has all the schemas defined for the request and response. So let's try to see how we can create a service stub quickly using this definition. So the command to do that again is Ballerina OpenAPI command. So we can do bal. So let me first create a package. So I'll move into the package, and okay. So now let's create a service based using the definition file. So I'll use a bal OpenAPI, and for the input, I will give the let's do .yaml. And since I want to generate the service, then I can set the mode to service. So as you can see, the tool generates 2 files. So let's have a look at what is being generated. Okay, so as you can see, we have the service definition here, and then we have all the types generated in this types.bal. so as you can see, for a API, something large like this, having everything in a single service might become a bit overwhelming. And based on different requirements, you might want to split the resources into multiple APIs. So in this case, you might ideal way to have this would be you have one service to handle the pets and another service to handle the store and a third service to handle the users. So in that case, so let's see how we can generate a service by splitting this definition into three parts. So the way to do that is, so you can again use the OpenAPI tool, and for this you can pass in another flag called tags. Then I will use the user tag here. So basically what we are doing is this definition have three tags. So we are using this user tag and generate a service that contain resources that only have this user tag. It's the last to override. So like you see only the user resources are now included in this service, and it also have the types. So if you want to create three service, you can create three Ballerina packages and basically create three different services for the different tags. Okay, so that's mainly into design first approach. So this demonstrated how you can move from already, if you have OpenAPI specification already defined, how you can move to the implementation of the service with that. So next, let's look at how to cope with change. So as you know, so if you consider the code first approach, so you'll end of the day, you will end up with the implementation and a OpenAPI definition file, right? And also if you follow design first, you end up with the same thing, the API definition and the implementation. So let's see how we can cope with changes and make sure both the OpenAPI definition and the service implementation will keep in sync. So let's go back to our code first project and open it. Right. So let's do a modification to this pets to OpenAPI YAML. So let's say I want to add another resource to track categories. And I'll define a get resource for the categories. And then I'll define the requests and the responses. Categories, categories, and here I'll okay. So basically, we did a modification to the pets to OpenAPI YAML. Okay, so now let's go back to our service implementation. So in order to keep these two sync, we can simply we can use our OpenAPI Validator plugin. So it's a compiler plugin that will validate the service implementation and the OpenAPI definition and check whether both of these are in sync. So the way to engage the validator plugin is by adding the OpenAPI annotation, service annotation. So here I'll add two attributes. One is to define the contract. So here I will give this file name. You can specify the paths to the definition here. Let's open API YAML, and I would say fail on errors true. So as soon as I engage the contract to this service, you can see a compile error. So basically it says could not find the Ballerina service resource for the path categories. So what that means is the implementation and the definition is out of sync. So then in order to proceed, we need to correct this. So let's add a resource function quickly. So we add a get resource categories, and then it returns categories, an array of categories. So like you can see, then we can detect any deviations with the documentation and the service and detect those and fix those. So in the future, the idea is to give like auto correction, quick code corrections for these validation errors. So in this case, when it says the resource is missing in this particular service file, we can have a quick fix that says, okay, add the resource. We will generate the resource based on the OpenAPI file, and we can quickly add it here. So one unique thing I would like to point out with Ballerina is so basically for the people who like to design, follow the design first approach, so they can do the design first approach using Ballerina source itself, because like once you get familiar with the record, the syntaxes, it's like fairly easier to write these records and the service resources rather than writing the maintaining the YAML itself. So that will help you to, even though you write the code, that will help you to follow a design first approach where you work on the interface and then gradually iterate on top of that and then move on. Okay, so that's mainly for service development. So I'll hand over to Sumudu to cover the how we can consume APIs with OpenAPI.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, everyone. I am Samudu from Ballerina team. Here in this presentation, I will going to explain you how you can generate a Ballerina connector using our OpenAPI tool. And in demo, I will explain how you can consume in API we are using our generated Ballerina connectors. Before moving to our main topic, I would like to give some brief introduction regarding what Ballerina connectors are. If we come to the Ballerina connectors, it's play the role as a client SDK with relevant to the similar languages. That means when you are going to consume in that Ballerina connectors with the service APIs, we needed to trigger that Ballerina connector actions. That connector actions are already defined as remote functions. That remote functions already map to your operations. I will explain in details while I'm doing some demonstration. For your well understand, I will pick this user story for my demonstration. Here I'm going to generate the Ballerina connector using this OpenAPI spec that provide is Intersoid. If I have some brief background description regarding the Intersoid, let me show you that OpenAPI. I hope you can see my screen. That Intersoid API is prepared for getting the currency rate according to your country code. It has some authorization mechanism, that is has a API key authorization, and it has one get parameter get operation, and it has a one query parameters. This is the YAML I'm going to use through my presentation. And moving forward, then firstly I needed to create the Ballerina connector using that Centroid OpenAPI with our OpenAPI tool. Then after that, I'm going to use that generated connector to send the email alert for my email inbox by mentioning that currency rate, current currency rate. Let's see how we can do it. In order to generate the Ballerina connector, I needed to create the Ballerina package. Here I use the bal command, bal new command with. Here I pick the template as a library since I'm needed to share my connector to use my future application. Yes. Here you can see the generated files inside that Ballerina package. Let me to get rid this test resource and sample Ballerina file since I'm not going to use it in this demo. This talking about this Ballerina timer, you can include all the configuration according to your package. You needed to address the talk name and name version, so on. Now I will demonstrate how you can generate your Ballerina connector using our Ballerina OpenAPI tool. Here I used to run the Bell OpenAPI CLI, providing OpenAPI specification earlier I mentioned. And here I needed to set my mode as a client since I'm going to generate the client connector. I think we are good in command and run to it. You can see there are 3 Ballerina files generated under the currency package. Let's go and check in detail how we are going to map that client generation with our given OpenAPI spec. In my right hand side representing the OpenAPI spec, I think. Then the left hand side representing the generated client, I think you can see it. If I start in top in generated client, you can see there is a API key configuration record we generated in here. This API key config record is consists with the security approach you are getting in your OpenAPI spec. That means when come to our OpenAPI spec, under the component schema, you can see there is a security schema component that your given OpenAPI spec has authorization mechanism with API key. Then that is that is why we are going to generate that API key recording there. If you are using some auto or some bear key or so on, that generated record is depend what you are providing as authorization under that security schema. Then moving forward, this is the simple client HTTP client class that map to your OpenAPI spec. Then this is how we are going to initialize the client class. Here we needed to pass the API key configuration and the client config and server URL, service URL. Here we pass the service URL as a defaultable parameter to the init. In here we pick this value under the section of the servers you are providing in OpenAPI spec. Then we are moving to the remote function mapping. This is the function that represent the Ballerina connector actions. This is how we are going to map that remote function with your with your operation defined in the spec. Here you can see we pick this get currency rate name function name from your operation ID. Then moving forward with the parameters, under the parameter section you can see there is a required query parameter type string. Those details we are going to map as a function parameter to the remote function. Then moving forward with the return section, in function signature we have a return section that returns, you can see we are returning currency info record and the error. Those return section also map to our response in our OpenAPI spec. You can see there are multiple status code they are going to return. In here, the 200 OK representing the object schema with currency info. These object schema earlier we mentioned, object also we can map as a Ballerina record. If I go to my type spell, this type spell including all the function component types you are defining in OpenAPI spec. This is how that object schema going to map in your Ballerina code. Then talking about the rest of the status code will handle through the error. Then after that, moving forward with the function body, you can see at the end we can do some HTTP get call, client call for getting the API, for calling the API. So this is how we are going to map our OpenAPI spec to our generated client. So in order to use this, I needed to create the Bala file for my connector. For creating the Bala file, I needed to run balpack command inside my generated package. You can see that my Bala file is also created under the target directory. Then where I needed to push this generated library as a package to my local repository because I'm going to use this connector in my future applications. There I use bal push command. Here I use bal push with repository as a set to local, since I'm going to share it to my local repository. Now you can see that successfully pushed to my local repository. Then now I'm going to show you how you can use that generated connector for your application. Our scenario is to get access the data via that accessing that connectors and send email to our inbox. Here I already had some implementation with my Ballerina package. Here we needed to create the new Ballerina package for our integration implementation. If I moving forward to explain what is in the implementation, here this is the way we are going to import our package to our application. You can see there is a error, we cannot resolve the module. This is happening since our package is not with our Ballerina pack. So we needed to solve via the local repository. Therefore, I needed to update my Ballerina tunnel with the dependency under the dependency section by adding the name and org and version. Mandatory field the repository should be a local because I send to the local. Yes. Then after that you can see I have some configurable. You can remember our connector is enriched with the API key authentication. Therefore, I needed to find that API key config there. Since it is a sensitive data, we encourage user to have as a configurable. Then, if I show you how we can create the client using the OpenAPI connectors, this is the way we needed to create the client with the new and pass in our API key config there. Then after that, this is the way we are going to consume API via the Ballerina connector actions, that is get currency rate. You can remember that function is a remote function we are generated under the client. Then this is how we are going to invoke in the integration with our generated client. Then my next part is to send the details to our email. Here I am going to access the result and the result rate. Since that result rate is a optional field, I needed to add the type card in here to check whether the coming value is a string or not. Then after that, I needed to create a simple email client to configure my email notifications. Then this is how we are going to configure it. Here also I pass the configurable details there. Then after that, this is how we are going to send the email using the email client. Let me to run this program. Yes. Then you got the success message since there is no any issue occurs has been successful sent. Then this is the way we are going to generate the OpenAPI connector using our OpenAPI tool, and this is how we are going to add your integration to make your integration seamless. Then earlier, if you are wanted to share your package in our Ballerina Central, you can push it to push Ballerina library to our central and make available for others to access as well. And you can reuse that via the Ballerina Central. If I show you that this is the Balance Central. Here we have a lot of connectors that generating using the OpenAPI tool. Since you are coming with the OpenAPI with the mostly usable, better you can check whether there is already generated connectors is there. Then you can reuse it for your application. As an example, I will show you. Yes, this is the one of OpenAPI connector we are generating using OpenAPI tool. Then I think you have we are come to end of our session. You have some idea about how we can use our OpenAPI tool for make your coding life easy. Now we are yes.
So basically that concludes the
Yeah.
today's session. So if you guys have any question, you can either put it in the chat or you can directly ask us. Okay, seems to be there's no question, so we can wrap up the session. And thank you all for joining for today's call, and hope you'll come to the next call as well.